And welcome Heather Vandertas, President of Northern Air Solutions, to the committee this afternoon. And just like to confirm that you received the letter for a witness coming before the committee. Very well. And would you like to do an oath or affirmation? Oath. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Vandertas, do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you have 10 minutes for an opening statement, or up to 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. My name is Heather Vandertas, and I am currently the President and Accountable Executive of Northern Air Solutions. I do believe that we are all here for the same reason. We want quality patient care. We want transfers that are done safely and efficiently. But most of all, we want a level of standards and business practices to which we all are held accountable. Northern Air Solutions currently operates our base out of 2 services and 2 locations, Muskoka and Thunder Bay. We offer primary and advanced patient care to the citizens of Ontario through our standing agreement with ORNGE. We have been conducting our business for the past 8 years, originally as directed by the Ministry of Health and now currently ORNGE. We have seen a lot of changes in the system, many of which is the reason why we are here today. Personally, and at Northern Air Solutions, we follow a particular philosophy that is not what happens, but how we deal with it that matters in the end. I ask the question regularly of myself and our staff: are we a part of and focused on the problem, or are we actively working on being a part of the solution? There is always an answer, but sometimes we must dig deep to find it. I believe that it is possible to possess incredible gifts, talents, and abilities, surround ourselves with amazing people, accomplish great feats, and count our many successes. But when it matters most, our name, credibility, reputation, and integrity are all that people will remember. Those, once lost, if not impossible, are extremely difficult at best to salvage. The question now is, how will confidence in all things ORNGE be restored? May I commend each of you on the committee for your diligence, the hours that you have spent poring over testimonies, transcripts, and the reports that you have been given. It appears a daunting task, and we all appreciate that you have not given up in the search for the truth of what has happened, how, and why. We hope that this committee will discover that which also continues to needing to be addressed, that you will draw your conclusions and reach the ever-important decision of how best to rectify the auditor's findings in his reports. Greed, selfishness, and fear should never be the driving philosophies of any organization. And as history has proven yet again, these castles eventually crumble, and as the empire falls, many good people are hurt in the process. There has been much finger-pointing, blame-shifting, and several people have tried avoiding taking responsibility or ownership for their part in allowing or continuing to allow these things to occur. We have seen some progress, some justice. Some people have been dismissed, stripped of their positions, and rightfully so. There are conflicting reports out there regarding packages and settlements that were reached as a part of that, which seems highly inappropriate to me based on the level of damages done, if true. And let us not forget that those who have come forward and were willing to confront the tough issues, individuals who had the courage to say that the emperor had no clothes and were willing to do something about it, those people who lost their jobs, or worse, were forced to resign, tainting their reputation and possibly career by doing so. Being painted as disloyal, untrustworthy, and troublemakers at the time, when in fact the very opposite was true. Success is not a measure of who we have stepped on, but what we have stood for. We as a people need to realize that atrocities from the past and those in the present were and can only be changed when people choose to have a voice, come forward, speak up, lead by example, and stop what is happening. Do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. May we always be mindful to create the kinds of environments where it is safe to do so, and I believe that the whistleblower policy is a step in the right direction. As leaders, let's own our mistakes. Let's learn from them. Let's accept responsibility for our part in it and then go on from there. I believe that we have reached that point as these hearings are drawing to a close where it is time to lay aside our own personal agendas, business and political, as really the taxpayers deserve it. This committee itself is proof that we can unite for a common purpose, put down our party colors, if you will, for the bigger picture and focus on the goal of now getting it right. We cannot change the past, but we can learn from it. What happened in the former regime, the out-of-control behavior of individuals that governed under the principle that they were not accountable and answered to no one, is unacceptable. Therefore, policy practices and governance must be put into place so that this does not happen again. There must be measurable accountability. This needs to be the priority in all departments and every level of service that Orange provides, and this, of course, would include the SA carriers. It is time to move forward in a positive direction. My hope is that this committee will provide concrete solutions, that you will be heard, and that the processes will be implemented to effect the positive change within this system. I do not believe that every government official is corrupt, that all levels of management are self-serving, and I choose to hope that those currently in places of leadership will, with the information in hand, be able to finally set things right. There are those who have survived the fallout at Orange, good men and women, workers, managers who care about what has gone on. And there needs to be a forum to get the input of the operations managers, the supervisors, those who have transitioned all of the changes. Listen to them. They are a great resource. I want to commend the dispatch center for the hard job that they do. The multiple computer programs, data entry systems, formulas that were thrown at them, which seem to be changing monthly, could not have been an easy task to manage. I know that through these transitions there were cutbacks to staff, and I hope that the current resources and manpower will be allotted accordingly, and that they all get the tools that they need to do the job to the best of their abilities. Their position is vital and stressful. Their environment is rapidly changing and fluid. They must be flexible, multitaskers, and they need to be properly trained. Listen to them. Get their input. They understand the needs of the patients, the issues of weather delays, ambulance delays, and so much more. They understand better than any computer program ever will. We are so blessed to have an incredible group of individuals who work for Northern Air Solutions. Our management and executive staff, our outstanding aviation team, the dedicated 20-plus advanced and critical care paramedics, our primary medical staff, and our maintenance group all work diligently and consider it a privilege to serve the citizens of Ontario. It has always been our desire for continual, open dialogue with the Ministry and with Orange. The standing agreement contract contains within it very stringent guidelines and parameters. All of the checks, balances, and criteria are written into the agreement for we, the carriers, to follow. And if adhered to and continually monitored, so that not only at the time of signing the agreement and being awarded a contract, but throughout the entire term, I believe the level of care, the level of safety, and the level of services will increase as we would all be held to the same standard. We are hopeful that the vision, mission, and values that we as a company continue to adhere to can propel us into the future, resulting in strategies and cooperation that will enhance the overall air ambulance program. And in closing, when you strip away all the boards, committees, charts, notes, graphs, and debate, the one thing that we must never forget, the most important thing, is that every day men, women, and children find themselves in a crisis situation, and they look to the emergency medical services programs for help. Often, air ambulance is taken for granted and not even thought about until that time of need. If it were your loved one, your neighbor, your friend, you would want to trust that the very best, most excellent, and safest care possible would be available to you. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, and we'll go to the NDP for questioning. And who would like to? Mr. Singh?
Do you want to start? Go ahead. You mentioned earlier, thank you for coming, thank you for your introduction. You mentioned that you have currently an existing relationship with Orange. Can you just briefly elaborate on what services you provide? I understand they would mostly be inter-facility transfers, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And how often in a given week are you providing these services?
Daily.
Daily, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you were providing these services for how long, approximately? When did you start providing services?
8 years ago.
8 years ago, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you, from your perspective as a carrier, when did you notice there was something wrong at Orange, and what did you notice? What were the first things that you noticed?
Well, I would say that the first situation that came to our attention was the fact that there were rumors that Orange was going to be starting its own aviation service. I know that we were at a meeting, and I had asked our VP of Aviation at the time who would be governing or accountable for that particular service. I didn't find it extremely inappropriate because there always was a dedicated level of service provider apart from the SA carrier as well. And I was told by asking some questions that the contract had expired and that there was going to be a new scenario in place. It was disheartening to learn that we heard that the process wasn't tendered, which we believe is necessary.
The appropriate way to do it.
Yes. So when I asked the aviation management team basically who is going to govern that, because the director of aviation at the time was looking after us as an air carrier and all of the standing offer agreements, and I was told that that wouldn't be an issue. And I believe that it's very complicated, time-consuming, and it's a very important role to run an aviation program, an air charter service, and the fact that one individual would technically now be responsible to look after us and themselves. I just found that a little disturbing.
And in terms of the actual practices going on at Orange, did you have any indication from some objective criteria that you saw or that you heard of that was going on at Orange that led you to believe that there might be something wrong, besides this perception that they were going to be entering into the aviation field?
I think, for me personally, we had believed that once Orange took over and had gotten into place, there were many directives and conversations that were held that there would be a partnering with stakeholders, that there would be a new level of service provided, that everything was going to be amalgamated, and we would be, in effect, a part of that team, a part of that level of service, that we would be now brought into working alongside of Orange. And apart from being dispatched and doing the job, I don't feel that the levels of performance, the scorecard that was built in, the many, would you say, the different parameters that were built into the RFP that said we would be working closely with Orange, I don't believe that that really occurred.
So besides anything work-related in terms of your ability to get contracts or to work with Orange, in terms of Orange's actual performance in their delivery of care, did you notice anything that was going on from your kind of third-person objective viewpoint, because you're not in the industry? Did you notice anything that was going on with Orange and its operations itself?
I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah. So you still provide services daily for Orange.
Yes.
Would you say that the type of services that you provide have changed?
No, I would actually say that through the last couple of years, it's it's increased for us as an organization because we only do air ambulance. We weren't an aviation company that does air ambulance as a side to everything else that we do. We built our organization to be able to provide air ambulance services. So our focus is to provide care, to provide equipment, and to be available for them to use.
And who do you usually serve? Like, from which hospital to which hospital is your bread and butter?
All over Ontario. We go everywhere.
Okay. Do you service Northern Ontario from Muskoka?
Thunder Bay.
From Thunder Bay. Okay. Okay. And so you would be able to provide services in any part of the province?
Yes.
As asked. Okay. And I'm sorry I missed the beginning.
That's okay.
Do you offer solely primary care, or do you offer advanced and critical?
Not critical. Advanced and primary.
In primary. And would you say your services are more requested for one level or another?
I would say currently we are doing a lot more advanced care currently than primary care, but we are available for both.
But you are available for both. And do you see a change in the mix or in the type of patient that you transport?
No, I would say the patient care scenario has pretty much always been the same.
Has stayed the same? Okay. And I don't know if you heard some of the previous speaker, you talk about a growth in the amount of calls that you service for Orange. Others have talked about declining. So can you explain how come you fared out so much better than the other carrier?
Well, I would hope, because it's the level of service that we provide. I think that we tried very hard to not only meet but exceed the standards that are put before us. We are available. Orange, first and foremost, is our primary contract, so we are available to them when they need us. I think that we simply do a good job, and we are available. The the dispatch center can count on us to always accurately give our availability, our times, our locations. We work very hard with the paramedics to move the patients quickly and effectively. And I believe that as Orange perhaps has gotten busier and needing to move potentially more patients, maybe as other carriers have opted to diversify a little more and not be as available to them, that would create perhaps holes in the system that maybe we would be filling.
Well, as good as an answer as any. I'm really trying to get, you are a standard offer agreement. You are an aviation service. Except for the, not liking more competition to come into a limited pie, why are your predecessor and why yourself, why are you so opposed to Orange having their own aviation service? You yourself started a new aviation service. You were successful in doing this. You're making a living. You're expanding. You're creating jobs. It's all good.
Yes.
Why is it so bad when the government or an agency of the government, in this case Orange, does the same thing, like you started a new aviation service? Why is it so wrong?
Well, I personally am not directly opposed to them having their own aviation service. I spoke at the beginning of my opening statement that I did not find it unusual because there was a dedicated service prior to that. So there was a helicopter program. There was an additional service provided that I was not a part of. And as I said, the only thing that I found unusual in the fact that Orange themselves did it was we were told that they were never going to do that. Then we were told that they were going to do that. Then we were told that was why, to become only dedicated to do the critical calls, to create a better service, and to amalgamate all of the issues that were out there. Again, I did not have a problem with that. What I did wonder about was when then we were told that there would never be a competition between us for patient care and for services, that the primary level of care would never be performed by Orange. And so when the fixed wing started to appear, again, it was said to pick up the slack, to be more available alongside the helicopters. That's what we were told. But it is a small world, and so when people in the field that are flying for Orange, flying for us, flying for any other carrier, are all sitting down having coffee or lunch in an FBO in, Sudbury or London, and they're, talking about, where they're flying off to, how the weather is, having general conversation, and knowing that they were moving primary patients as well, as a business person, you do start to wonder how much of that will encroach upon our current livelihood, because that is all we do, what we've created our organization to do, and the fact that we were told it wouldn't happen. I understand from the business perspective of Orange that if they have all this machinery and they have the people to do the job, then obviously they're going to use their own tools to get it done prior and over and above us. So I'm not directly opposed that Orange has an air service per se. It's just some of the manner in which it was done and how we weren't sort of truthfully given the big picture, if you will.
All right. Good answer. I appreciate your openness and your truthfulness. We can't change the past. None of us, and believe me, it would be really different if I could, but
Yes.
I can't, and neither can this committee or any of us.
Mm-hmm.
So if we concentrate on the future from now on,
Yes.
what would make a better air ambulance service in Ontario?
I think, as I said in my statement, the stakeholders working together, having a united panel of people who share the ideas, collectively function and lay our agendas aside to do the service. I think that it's important to me as an arm of what Orange does, moving patients in exactly the same manner in which they do it, to be a part of some of the training and some of the offerings that they put together, because everything is done, and it is costly to run an aviation service. I'm sure as you read some of the things you can see that. As a taxpayer, it was a little awkward to have to go and use all of my own money and resources to then fund a program, and then as a taxpayer fund a program that's doing exactly the same thing in opposition to me, as opposed to collectively working with and for me.
So if we take your ideas of all of the providers, including Orange own air aviation service, working together, how do you put safeguards in place? You are a for-profit company. If there is no money in there for you, you're out of there, you're out of business.
Correct.
I'm not being mean about it.
I
am
understand.
stating the obvious.
Yes.
I don't wish any harm upon your company. I hope you will fly for a long time. But at the end of the day, when you bring the players together, you are bringing players whose, whether they stay in business or not, depends on getting a deal. How can, we are human beings, how can you check that at the door? Pretty hard thing to do.
It is, and I believe that the former management of Orange created such a tangled, intricate level of services and combined them all so tightly. That is why I say we can't change the past, and I don't think you can just immediately dismantle everything that's in place, because the taxpayers, the patients of Ontario will suffer. I think that I'm talking more about innovative ideas. I'm not talking about us all sitting around a table as carriers, collectively driving the prices. I'm more talking about the ability of CEOs, management, to maybe come by and see us, get some input, see what we feel, because we're in the field flying on a regular basis, performing the level of services. What do we need? What could be improved? Just getting our input is more what I mean.
Okay, which would make sense. If we come back to, we're focusing on the future, you are in charge of those innovative ideas coming forward, what would be the first thing that comes to mind?
I would think that I think it would be very prudent to sit down with the new managers and people in oversight that are governing what it is that we do. I think that, as we said, this request for proposals should be followed, should be mandated, and we should be audited and checked to ensure that we're doing that on a regular basis with the people who are educated and understand what it is that they're looking for and looking at.
Good point. Thank you. That you make a very good point. So you feel right now that although we have this document, the request proposal, if nobody checks that all of the carriers are actually delivering, then it's all for none.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I want to take you back to patient care. You are there on the front line. Your staff is there on the front line. Do you see shortcomings directly related to the care that people receive that you or us, or if you tell us, we could improve?
I think that there is basically the ongoing issue of simply, which a lot of it you cannot control, ambulance delays so just tightening up things at the dispatch center, the on-the-ground facilities, talking with each other, having an understanding of what it is, so that when we're coming in with a seriously ill patient, that there isn't a miscommunication, that the ambulance is there waiting, ready to transport, not a lot of time spent sitting on the ground, waiting around with patients in the aircraft. I think that is an ongoing
That
concern
actually
of ours.
happens? Could you tell me last time you saw that, where you did your work, you went and did the pickup, you're back at the airport, and the land ambulance is not there?
Yes, oftentimes it will occur that the land ambulances themselves get called onto another call, knowing that we're coming in. I'm not sure the intricacies of how each community functions with their CAC service and how the call is dispatched, and I know that Orange contacts them to have them coming out. And simply logistics, again, plays a huge factor that needs to be focused on, because in places like Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie, there's quite a drive just to get to the airport from the community itself. And so those delays can take a while.
You mentioned in your opening comments something about the need for protecting whistleblowers if someone wanted to come forward and raise concerns or raise issues. Maybe you could elaborate on that and how we could work towards creating more protection for whistleblowers?
Well, I think simply the policy that you're looking to address will accomplish that. As I said, people have noticed for a long time and had noted, people, of course, privy to a lot more information than myself, financial things and just conduct, that there was a fear to come forward, that you would lose your job, that you wouldn't be perhaps awarded a contract. There is that saying out there, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and we're all aware of that. So there are many times that I believe that if there's not an open communication and the ability for people to feel value, to feel trusted, and to feel that they are safe in bringing forward their concerns and cares, that they're not going to speak up. They're going to maybe look for another job. They're maybe going to resign that position because they feel maybe no one is listening and perhaps no one cares.
No, it's a great point, and it's very important that we allow people that forum, that ability to come forward with their concerns. Do you know if any SA carriers, you don't have to say who or any specific details to identify them, but did SA carriers generally have any concerns that they would have liked to have brought forward about Orange, about what was going on in Orange, besides the aviation bit? Was there anything that
like people were noticing financial things, they were noticing conducts. Any of this that you as a aviation service had noticed yourself or your staff had noticed about Orange?
You have one
Well, specifically, I would say that just implementing, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but continually, whenever Orange decides that there's a new piece of equipment or, engraving their name on the back of their seats in their, when they ordered the brand new aircraft, they could do those type of things. I would say that just a lot of money spent on programs on, I think, apart from the aviation side, and it has been spoken to, that the idea that that organization would now, but it is common amongst all of us, would be potentially looking for qualified, trained people to fill the roles of pilots and medics, and that the very aspect that they have a large budget provided by the Ministry of Health to fund that, it is difficult for a small operator perhaps to potentially compete with the salaries and the all the benefit packages and things that are out there. So it would be appealing and would be enticing for people to leave even a great organization to go for the further package. So that would be some of it. Their budget was a lot bigger to do the same job that they were mandated, and we are as well, to do. I would say that the aviation aspect was probably the greatest concern of the carriers, and I think that we've all heard testimony of the spending habits of former management. So that in itself, as we had saw in small portions until this committee and the auditor's report exposed the full measure of that.
What have you seen? And I'm sorry, we're out of time, so we'll move to the government. Mr. Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Vandertas. Thank you very much for being here today and taking the time to give us this presentation. It's insightful and helpful, and I appreciate you being here. I mentioned this morning when Mr. Mackey was here from Thunder Air, excuse me, I really appreciate the opportunity that from the government side, we have an opportunity in front of the cameras to discuss agencies as distinctive from government-run ministries. Right. Because I know that the general public doesn't make the distinction when something happens in an agency like Orange or eHealth or the OPA, whatever it may be. They'll pick up the phone and they'll say, Billy, what the heck is going on? And when I try and explain some of the distinction, of course, that lasts about 5 seconds and their eyes glaze over, as would mine. And so that's why I think this is a wonderful opportunity, and I always like it when agencies are called before a committee that we're on the government side, because it gives us a chance to speak a little bit about the administration and why sometimes some of these things tend to go, if I could use the word, a bit rogue. And I appreciate your insights and the discussions on whistleblowers and all of that. So I very much appreciate it. How many employees do you have right now?
About 50. 50?
The split between Muskoka, Thunder Bay?
Yes, Muskoka, Thunder Bay, Management, Human Resources.
But the split is...
those are the two bases, yeah.
Is about the same? Is it 50-50 split?
No, there would be more in the Muskoka base because that was the original.
Okay.
That is where the bulk of our...
Now, in response to one of the earlier questions, you mentioned 8 years ago. Is that when the company started?
Yes.
So I'm just working backwards. Your company would have begun almost at the same time that Orange came to be.
Yes.
Did you have a pre-Orange history as a company?
Just for one period of time with the OAA.
Yeah, it must have been a very short...
1 year. Yes.
One year.
Mm-hmm.
And so your ability to comment on, because there's this financial piece, of course, as a private operator that we very much respect, that you're, as mentioned by the opposition, in a business to make money, we need to respect that. But also for me, very interested in care levels, as has been affected by the changes at Orange. So you had only 1 year of experience as a company prior to Orange. So it leaves you perhaps less able to provide a broad-based opinion on the changes that would have occurred post-Orange as compared to pre-Orange. Would that be fair for me to say? You had a very small window of...
Yes, actively participating. I was aware, as there was another air carrier in our community prior to we starting
Okay.
our organization, who ended up retiring. And because that left
I
what
see.
we felt a hole
A void.
in the industry, a void, we opted to then start a service to carry it on.
So when you started your service, I think you said 100% of your work then, and I'm not sure about still, was air ambulance.
Correct.
Then and still both.
Yes.
Okay, so you're not charters, you're not anything else?
We've done a couple of charters for the Ministry of Natural Resources with firefighting, that type of thing, with our excess aircraft, but we have dedicated ourselves to doing the air ambulance.
So that's what I want to drill down to a little bit. So God bless private industry, but your business model, if I'm you, I'd be a little worried. So if I'm invested 100% in a government contract that gets retendered every how many years?
There's been a variety.
Okay.
So currently...
Even more dangerous.
The current one, it's gotten better, actually. So the current one is 3+2.
That's what okay. An option for the ministry to go another 2, or Orange to go a further 2?
Yes.
Okay, so the options with them. So you're guaranteed 3 if you win?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you mean by win?
Well, if you are successful in the bid
Yes.
to get the work.
Yes.
So that's what I mean.
Okay.
If you're not successful and 100% of your business is with them, then you're out there looking for work.
Correct.
And you've got 50 employees
Yes.
who have a problem. So my question is, what does it mean to you then, given that you're not a diversified business in terms of the RFP and how you bid?
Yes.
I mean, because there's a piece I'm going to get here to in a second that's very interesting that seems to contradict a bit what was presented to us this morning. So there's 2 components. Is it fair to say broadly it's about service levels, response times, that sort of thing, and cost?
Correct.
So tell me what it means to you, who has no other business line except the government work, to bid. I mean, does it mean you need to significantly go low when you go in to ensure that you're getting work? I'm just a little bit curious of that. I did a lot of tendering in my day, and
Well, that would be the expected answer, but in our
Right.
particular case, it is not.
okay.
So I don't go into business to lose money,
Yep.
to not be able to give a level and a standard of service of which is expected. So we have put financial things into place to ensure that the style and model that we use to conduct our business can afford some leeway. I don't believe that patient care should be in the hands of the lowest bidder, personally.
Right.
I don't
Thank you.
feel that creates a
Yep.
safe environment. I
Right.
don't feel
Absolutely.
that is prudent to anything that we're trying to accomplish. I believe in fair competition. I believe that there is room for obviously more than one organization to be able to do this, or we wouldn't all be working.
Okay.
So
Well, I agree with you, and I'm glad you said that, because in my day when I was doing tendering, oftentimes you were a little bit worried and not so happy when a particular company was low bid and you had to give them the work if that was the only criteria you had, because you knew it would create more problems and you knew it could ultimately be more expensive for you even though you had this lower bid. So I agree. But for your protection as a company, if there are 5 SAs currently through Orange, when it's tendered, how many bidders are there? Are there 6? Are there 16? Do you have a sense?
well, I think there was probably 13 to 15
That
last
many.
time. When we
Okay.
started, you have to remember that there were 15
Yeah.
carriers at the time.
Sure.
So if you quickly do the math, that the number of patients likely is increasing and hasn't decreased,
So you're busier.
then you would be busier. So
Okay.
we are expanding our organization as to depleting it to
Yeah.
keep up with that demand.
Does the RFP itself have an accommodation for experience
Regarding what?
regarding you as a company? I mean, many RFPs will have a point rating system, and there could be anywhere from 5 to 50 different variables, and each one would be assigned a point value. Sometimes it might have experience in there.
Yes.
And I'm just still on the same theme here in terms of your ability to continually get work as a carrier through the SA. Is there a point rating system or some points attached? Is it just money and service? I mean, how is it?
I would,
Do you get some accommodation for the years of experience you have in the field?
well, I would certainly hope so. There
Okay.
is a historical, as part of your management plan, you do give your historical ability to perform service.
Right.
The different levels of care are required. There's a lot of information in there that
Right.
you
Okay,
have
so
criteria to...
Orange can look at that and say, well, look, we've got Northern Air here. They've done a great job, and there's some capacity or some flexibility for them to accommodate that in the decision.
I would hope they would say that.
Okay. Okay. I got a couple more questions, and then I'm going to share with my colleague, Ms. Jazik. Interested in your comments about advanced care. So this morning, as presenter from Thunder Air, I believe, and I'm being very careful, I don't want to be seen as trying to put words in his mouth, but I thought, or at least I was left with the impression, that he no longer did advanced care work. So either I'm wrong in my conclusion, because I was interested in that in terms of what it meant for patients and the care they were receiving. Mm-hmm. So I was left with the impression this morning that there wasn't, his company was not doing advanced care work. So A, either I'm wrong, or B, if I'm right, then does it mean that the 5 SAs, some may do advanced care and some don't?
Correct.
Okay, so then it would have to ensure, so if a call came in that was an advanced care situation, yes. You work out of Thunder Bay, Thunder Air works out of Thunder Bay, there would be no choice but to give you the call because of its advanced care requirement.
If they currently weren't offering that service, then I would expect so. I mean, Orange is there as well.
But to be clear, I apologize for pressing you on the point. Some of the SAs, when they tender,
yes.
They're tendering that we will provide advanced care, and some of them are tendering that we will not?
Correct.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So this morning then, when some of us, including me, may have been left with that impression that when somebody took a flight to go pick up a patient in Big Trout Lake or someplace else, mm-hmm. and they went up there and it was an advanced care situation, it would be an advanced care airline who would get the call.
Yes. And I think if you check the transcripts from the previous week, when you had other providers give their testimony, you would find that SkyCare also provides advanced care as well out of Sioux Lookout.
So if a carrier tells me that they only do primary care,
that would be their choice.
They would bid accordingly, that we only want to do primary care?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. Now you do inter-hospital transfers only? I mean, do you ever, you're just fixed wing, so it's inter-hospital. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. The last piece before I share my time with Ms. Jazik, I want to speak a little bit about this land ambulance piece and when you land. It is a major issue. Just last week in Thunder Bay, we had a great little announcement where for a relatively small amount of money, we were able to create an incredible level of efficiency between the emergency management services, between the hospital, and between the city, of course, which delivers the emergency management services as the designated delivery agent for the District of Thunder Bay. I mean, this is the model now that we have that was given to us from the previous government where the land ambulance became the purview of a DDA. So for a little bit of money, we've created quite a remarkable efficiencies. The point being that those ambulances that you were talking about are going to be freed up much sooner when they're bringing patients to a hospital.
That's good.
I appreciated your distinction in terms of the Sault Ste. Marie Sudbury examples, where the airports are a significant distance from the municipality itself. Can you tell me a bit about your experience in Thunder Bay with the ambulance piece? When you return, you have somebody. Do you find yourself waiting too long? And if you do find yourself waiting too long, what is it that might have occurred to create that?
Well, I would think that the simple answer to that likely is the fact that there are only a certain amount of vehicles allotted to each community within their air ambulance or their land ambulance service. Yeah. And out of that, when air ambulance is coming forward to move patients, it is actually drawing different vehicles out of that system for a short period of time. Yeah. And if there's a 50-car pileup on the highway and they all get dispatched there while we're sitting at the airport waiting to move a patient. However, the dispatch center does then work diligently to try to get a land transfer service that's not an ambulance, perhaps.
Right. If it's an issue of a non-emergent situation,
taxi.
A delay would leave a patient uncomfortable and perhaps not happy, but
Sure.
necessarily not in any danger from a healthcare perspective.
Yes, I would assume that every level of care would
Prioritized.
work in priority to give the best service to the patient,
Thank you.
regardless.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Vandertas, for your approach today. I really enjoyed hearing from you your focus on patient safety, patient care. You've obviously developed a business model that has worked for you through the years, notwithstanding obviously what we all acknowledge here as having been some major problems with the previous regime at Orange. So I'd like to focus on the situation now.
Okay.
You do provide advanced patient care. Do you have difficulty in terms of retaining or recruiting advanced care paramedics to staff up your fleet?
I personally do not. I think that, as I said, hopefully we have a great reputation, our level of integrity, and the service levels that we really strive to provide, working alongside as able as possible with Orange to do things to the same level or exceed that, brings a lot of the advanced care paramedics into our organization. They talk to each other. They determine whether our aircraft are clean, operational, safe. Our crew, are they, again, do we follow proper procedures? Is there safety in our patient care? Because at the end of the day, those medics are responsible for that patient. And if we as an organization are not going to provide the tools and everything necessary for them, we're going to pay them, we're going to ensure that they have all their training and everything is met. So I personally do not seem to have a problem recruiting advanced or critical care medics, even though we don't currently do the critical care aspect, because that is the dedicated Orange part. There are critical care medics that do work as advanced care on my service.
Yes, thank you. Now, you talked a little bit about dispatch and changes and so on. We know, obviously, having the Auditor General's report, that this is an area that the then Auditor General suggested that there be a focus on, and there are changes, and as we've heard from Orange themselves, they're looking to improvements. Would you say that you're satisfied in terms of your relationship with the dispatch center? Is it a good and seamless system that we have at the moment? And if not, what areas can you see for improvement?
Well, I personally believe that everyone within our organization doesn't have anything but good things to say about the current dispatch, the people answering the phones. I think sometimes there are long wait times, as I do believe that some of the staffing was downsized through some of this transition. I do believe that I had heard, I can't completely speak to that formerly, prior to Orange, when it was the Ministry of Health, and then for a period of time with Orange, pilots were hired to operate and work the dispatch side, because they would understand weather, they would understand time frames, they would understand that kind of a thing, and they could speak pilot to pilot, if you will, with that side of the organization. And then medics were hired who had an understanding of the paramedical aspect, and they would answer and be the call takers for the medical concerns and be talking directly with the medics that are on board our aircraft as well. I think there was some amalgamations. I heard levels of frustration in the call takers' voices sometimes. They were a bit stressed as they were short-staffed, perhaps, to perform their job. It can be slow sometimes. Everything can be dispatched out, and then something can occur, and the phones are ringing off the hook. We have guys in the field trying to call in. Maybe they're not able to answer the phone as quickly because they're on other calls, that type of thing. But, I mean, I train all of our staff to have patience and grace, to understand what goes on behind those desks, screens coming in, ambulance calls, patients canceling, hospital beds not available when calls are lined up. So as I said, it's very fluid and transitional. They need to be multitasking and flexible, but they do need to be trained, and there needs to be enough of them to fully be able to do the job that they're required to do. And I think that, again, in the training that we do, be direct, be concise, don't fool around on the phone, just, but be personable. They're people on the other side. They're not, a bunch of, people telephone soliciting. They're actually there doing a very critical, very important job. And from my experience and that of our organization, they do it well. They just need more tools.
Okay, thank you. So perhaps maybe we'll just switch a little bit in terms of your availability. When the call comes in, what percentage of time are you able to actually dispatch your own aircraft?
You mean what time frame, like how long from the call?
Yes, and sort of, are there times when you are absolutely not able to, or does it work pretty much?
I would say the only time we're really not able to perform a level of service, because we give our availability a few times throughout the day.
Okay.
Perhaps if we were finishing up some maintenance on an aircraft, for example, if we weren't going to be available till 9 a.m. because we're finishing up from the previous evening, coming back from a flight, and something needed to be performed on the aircraft, or that type of thing. But in our availability, we are ready and prepared to take the flight, take the call, and do it.
So basically there's good communication but from both sides, in essence.
Yes.
Just one last question about oversight. In terms of the ministry coming in, auditing, inspections and so on, what have you seen, say, over the last couple of years?
Well, the Ministry of Health itself, the certification and investigation that actually gives us our approval and does the audit in which we are checked and balanced as to providing everything, they come regularly to do that. When certain things started to go awry, as you've heard in previous testimony, myself, like others, talked to the auditors, inquiring, is there anything that they could do? We found, I was invited to participate in a scenario a few years back when things were going on to just ensure that the audit tools that the ministry was using at the time, so there was representatives from Orange, there were some business people from Toronto and myself, and we met collectively with them at that time to create an audit tool that they would use. I think a lot of those things were originally based from the land ambulance model, and some of them are not applicable to an aircraft. So they wanted to ensure that things were done well and that things were taken out that didn't pertain and that type of thing, and they got our input. So from that perspective, the tools that are used, I believe, are well written, well done, and will capture anything that isn't, meeting the criteria. However, that kind of seems to be where their role and responsibility stops, is coming in, auditing us, ensuring our license is continual, and there isn't really any other interaction with them apart from bringing on a new aircraft, setting up a new base. They will come at that point, reevaluate your program, reevaluate where you're at, look at your aircraft. But that only happens at those points.
And does
Okay,
Orange...
I'm sorry, we're out of time, so we'll move to the opposition. Mr. Klees?
Ms. Vandertas, thank you for being here. Appreciate your information. I'll just pick up where Ms. Jazik left off and let you finish that thought. And so just to clarify, the Ministry of Health
Yes,
provides your certification.
correct.
And that happens at the point of the initial approval of your contract, is that correct?
Yes,
Or if you bring on a new aircraft, the Ministry of Health provides an audit and provides their certification to you. Is that right?
yes.
In addition to that, how many other audits would the Ministry of Health do of your base, of your aircraft, over the course of a year?
They do not.
They do not?
No.
So the only time that you really have interaction with the Ministry of Health from an audit or an
Yes.
inspection standpoint is at the time when you first make your application for the contract.
And then every 3 years.
And then every 3 years
Yeah.
after that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to clarify that because my question to you is whether, in your opinion, it may be prudent for the Ministry of Health to do those audits perhaps more often, perhaps on an unannounced basis, because how you start is not necessarily how you end up.
Correct.
And so particularly with regard to one of the proponents, one of the witnesses who was here, who actually admitted that his organization was having some financial challenges. In a circumstance like that, where, not because of want, but because of circumstances, they may not be able to maintain those standards, they may have lost employees, and as a result, the organization that was audited by the Ministry of Health 2 years ago may not be the same organization.
Yes.
I'd like your comment.
Organization, if you are working to provide the very best care and service that you can offer, I don't feel that you should be threatened by people coming in. We've always invited people to come, to be available. I personally learn a lot from the audit, whether it is with Transport Canada, the Ministry of Health, that you actually grow and you learn and you can figure out where in the day-to-day perhaps things might be missed. You're speaking to a much larger problem, but even on the smaller aspects, that you could, familiarity you can get comfortable, you can possibly neglect some things that you see on a daily basis and aren't aware of. So I think it would absolutely be relevant and prudent to be audited on a much more regular basis to keep us all compliant, to keep us all accountable, and to prove yet again that we are doing the job that we said we would do, that we aren't simply just trying to get a contract for the sake of it, but that we want to serve, we want to do a great job, and we welcome scrutiny, really. So I would agree.
Okay, so we've established that the Ministry of Health does no audits other than once every 3 years.
Yes.
I think we've also established, and I'd like your comments on this, the RFP makes it very clear that Orange intends to audit
Yes.
A minimum of twice a year. That's on page 62 of this RFP.
Yes.
Can I ask you, since your initial approval of the contract, how often has Orange visited your facilities, your bases, to conduct those audits?
Simply at the time of an initial base setup, an initial aircraft setup, initial additional service, that would be all.
So Orange also has not conducted any additional audits other than at the time of the initial installation. Is that correct?
Correct. And that was where I was answering Ms. Jelena's question of the fact that it was disappointing, not that Orange was setting themselves up to be an organization of business, but the fact that the statements made, the vision statements that were released by Dr. Mazza and all of those things seem to imply that we would all now be brought into a higher level of care and governance and that type of thing. And as I said, if you're open to that, then that can only make you a better service. So the fact that that wasn't done was very disappointing to me, actually.
And I can tell you that it's equally as disappointing to us that hasn't happened. Because when we received the Auditor General's report, his 5 recommendations were all focused on the need for additional oversight and additional accountability, regular reporting.
Yes.
And when we hear now from people like yourselves on the front lines that is still not happening, it gives us cause for concern, because while we hear a lot about a change of personnel and new executive and a new beginning, at the very core of what should be happening, we're still not seeing the necessary change.
Yes.
And I'd like to just ask some of the implications of that. In your RFP, there are some very specific requirements in terms of how your equipment should be outfitted. And I think one of them deals, and maybe you can help me with the terminology. I should know it by now, but it is the collision avoidance.
The TCAS and TAWS?
That's right.
Yes.
And I believe there's also a requirement now for an autopilot. Is that correct?
Yes, there's always been a requirement that you have a functioning autopilot, that it works and it is gone through your aviation system, so
Right.
that it's in there. And the TCAS and TAWS for several years have been a requirement that the ministry had put in. It's a Transport Canada responsibility as well, with some of the changing regulatory things that have come down. And so yes, those have been implemented. We were given a time frame in which to put them in, and to have all of that audited and checked to ensure that it was done.
And so when you put your price into the RFP process,
Yes.
You and the others would have considered that as an ongoing cost to you, or as a capital cost to you,
Yes.
and your bids would have been submitted accordingly.
Yes.
You're in compliance with all of those requirements?
Yes.
Has Orange done any audits to ensure that SA carriers are in full compliance with those requirements since the issuing of the RFP, to your knowledge?
This one?
Yes.
No.
They have not. It's a small world, the aviation business, and you see each other's aircraft from time to time, and I'm assuming there's some movement of employees and pilots and so on. I'm not asking you to blow the whistle on any of your competitors, but can you tell me, to the best of your knowledge, would there be any SA carriers who are not in full compliance with that requirement?
As hearsay, I would say yes. As people, pilot movements, employee movements, discussions, as I talked about around a lunch table, I would say that is a fair statement to make.
And that's a pretty serious set of circumstances.
Right, considering that it's 4+ years ago that mandatory requirement was put in place and has remained in every RFP since. So even if it didn't get done in the previous 2 leaderships, it should certainly have been in place by this one.
So there's no question that the Ministry of Health and Orange are monitoring these hearings. And I'm confident that Dr. McCallum will take note of this. Because certainly we're not going to rest until Orange and the Ministry of Health take this issue of oversight and accountability and doing the appropriate inspections until they really fully understand that this is not an option.
Right.
This is fundamental, not to economics, but to patient care and to the safety of the frontline people who are flying those aircraft and the paramedics who are providing the service.
Yes, that's correct.
I asked a question this morning in the House of the minister. And my question had to do with an incident that took place in the early hours of August 29th, where apparently Thunder Air was dispatched to a scene. When they arrived, an Air Bravo aircraft was already there, with two paramedics from Kenora.
Okay.
And they were attending to a patient. They were not able to fly that patient to Thunder Bay.
Thunder or Air Bravo?
It was Air Bravo who had initially been dispatched there.
Okay.
So they were on scene.
Right.
Air Bravo was Thunder Air was subsequently dispatched to the same scene.
All right.
And the reason for that, allegedly, is that the satellite telephone was not functional. And because of the critical condition of the patient, they were not able to, that is, Air Bravo was not able to transport that patient to the hospital at Thunder Bay.
Okay.
And so when you consider the time delay of getting another aircraft to that location,
Okay.
because of that kind of functional failure, one might be able to draw a conclusion that the outcome for the patient may well have had something to do with how that whole issue was handled. In this particular case, unfortunately, the patient died. Here's my point, and the reason I put the question to the minister. Air Bravo was here and under testimony admitted that his organization, this is Mr. Horvath who was testifying, is having serious financial challenges. When I asked him the question if a credit check was done on his company at the time of application, he said no. When I asked him if a credit check was done today, would his organization qualify or would Orange actually approve him as a carrier? His response was that he wasn't sure, he didn't know. Here's my point. Whether it's true that the reason that that sat phone wasn't functioning is because the bill wasn't paid, the issue is it not a responsibility of Orange and of the Ministry of Health to ensure that the carriers who have the responsibility to have their equipment in functioning order, that they are in fact compliant with all of the issues, all of the contractual obligations, that those companies are fiscally strong enough to actually deliver the service? Would that not be a fundamental first step for both Orange and the ministry to take?
Absolutely.
Why is that not happening?
You'd have to ask the oversight, the leadership, why it doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm not sure where we used to have to provide that. I'm not sure why we don't anymore. I can't speak to why they don't because I don't know.
This RFP, 2 RFPs ago, there was a Schedule A.
Yes.
That required financial statements, that required proof of fiscal stability.
Yes.
For the last 2 RFPs, that entire schedule hasn't been included in the RFP. Is that correct?
Yes.
When you saw that that requirement was no longer part of the RFP process, did it bring any questions to your mind?
I guess the question it brought to my mind was if I had missed something in reading it, because it's a big document that they put out and perhaps it was in another area. So in part of your management plan or in part of your references, there's a reference section that you can put. So we just opted to just at least put our bank and bank manager information in there for something. I think it was just a matter of I'm not clear on how these proposals are written, how they're formatted, who does that, and I didn't think a lot of it at the time other than perhaps I had missed an area of putting that in. I did not see it in there.
I think it's a major oversight, a huge mistake on the part of Orange.
Yes.
And I know that Mr. Morrow, who indicated that he has done a lot of work in the bidding and procurement area, would probably agree that there would be no circumstances that any of us would know of where that fundamental piece of information would be missing.
Well, I think it's really important that the type of work that we do, that we very much should be vetted before we are given the opportunity to serve for the very reasons that you just spoke of.
You made reference earlier in your comments that all should be held to the same standard, that is, all of the people who are bidding into these RFPs. Do you believe that that's happening today?
Based on the comments that you just made, I would say no.
Okay. I'd like to just deal very briefly with this issue because it's become a philosophical debate, I think, to some degree as to whether Orange should be in the aviation business or not.
Yes.
And the question, of course, the natural question that people would have is, well, you're making a profit. At whatever you're charging, you're making a profit. Mm-hmm. Orange is not for profit. And so, obviously, they don't have to build that cushion into it. What we've seen, though, from evidence is that, not only is Orange not for profit, they're a huge money loser and a huge waster of money. Now, with all credit to the current executive, I won't paint them with that brush.
Right.
But just because an organization is not for profit doesn't mean that it's efficient. It doesn't mean that it can't compete, and it doesn't mean that a for-profit company can't deliver a product for less money than that not-for-profit organization. I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us why you feel that Orange may be able to be more efficient at what they do, and if Orange was asked to bid into the same RFP as you and your private sector proponents, how competitive would they be if they didn't have the cross-subsidization of the additional funds that they get indirectly from the Ministry of Health?
And you have about a minute and a half for this response.
She'll need more time than that, sure. Yeah.
Well, all playing fields being level, I would say that the structure and the largeness of the organization that they have created, right from the ground up to every level, the layers of management, the layers of people who were brought in to do particular jobs, I think it's a little difficult to speak to the full fundamental program of Orange, because I think the aspect of amalgamating and taking over and running the medical side, the medical governance, that type of thing, if we remove that and simply they had to start at ground zero, go to the bank, get the loans, get the aircraft, set the stuff up, go through a credit check and have everything done, who actually would be funding that, who actually would be doing that, and how quickly and credible with, no experience perhaps, would they be able to grow to the level that they have as quickly as they have without, I myself have perhaps inappropriately commented sometimes, if I had your budget, I could do those things too, type of thing. And I think that I don't know that they would be able to compete freely with having to go get the investment, sit before the banks, give credit, get audited, and do those things without, as you said, discretionary funds at their disposal. I presume they put a budget together. I'm not sure what that is based on or how that came to be originally, because as we've heard in previous testimony, we had to submit all of our information to them at the very beginning for them to review, and perhaps out of that they were able to establish what the costs and role and function of every department would be and what it would look like from the leasing of aircrafts. I believe they've done things on a much grander level and scope than any of us ever could have or would have to bring that to the forefront. It was Dr. Maz's dream and idea to have the most amazing airline in the world, and I think he spent money as if it was already profitable and was at that point. But I don't know that I would say categorically that they would be able to compete fairly with us if all things were equal.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming before the committee today.
Okay, thank you.
And our next witness is from Wabusk Air, Derek Worry, EMS. And Mr. Paul Cox, the president, was invited, but he's unable to be here because of an emergency. You can ask for a 5-minute recess. 5-minute recess then. Okay, sorry, we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, we'll get going again. We have Derek Worry from Wabusk Air, and just to confirm, you've received the letter for a witness coming before the committee.
Yes, I have.